Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about Macbeth, Act 4. Act 4 is short, but it contains one of the coolest scenes in the play, and also the only boring scene in the play, which, even though the act is short, seems to go on forever. I'm sorry, it's Shakespeare's fault, not mine. Let's start with the cool scene, Act 4, Scene 1. In this scene, we see Macbeth's increasing obsession with knowing the future, and we're also presented with more problems with language. Language's ambiguity, its tendency to express too little or too much, and maybe also our tendency to hear what we want to hear rather than what is said. Macbeth goes to see the witches again and demands that they tell him more about what's going to happen to him. They respond with 3 prophecies and a strange vision. You will want to pay close attention to the language of the 3 prophecies. They're strange, and Macbeth thinks he knows what they mean, but whether he really does know what they mean, you won't find out until the end of the play. The first prophecy is simple. Macbeth, 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 beware Macduff, beware the Thane of Fife, dismiss me, enough. Remember, Macduff is the Thane who did not show up at Macbeth's banquet, because he's gone to England to talk to Duncan's son, Malcolm, about overthrowing Macbeth. Macbeth is already suspicious of Macduff, though he's, by this point, suspicious of pretty much everyone. The second prophecy seems simple. Be bloody, bold, and resolute. Laugh to scorn the power of man, for none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. The prophecy is that no one born of a woman can hurt Macbeth. That sounds like no one at all can harm Macbeth, because what human being isn't born by a woman? Macbeth is overjoyed at this prophecy, since it makes him sound invincible, but he's also still paranoid. Then live, Macduff, what need I fear of thee? But yet I'll make assurance double sure, and take a bond of fate. Thou shalt not live, that I may tell pale-hearted fear it lies, and sleep in spite of thunder. If no one born of a woman can harm Macbeth, then Macduff can't either, even though the witches told Macbeth to beware of Macduff. Still, to make, as Macbeth puts it, double sure, Macbeth is going to try to have Macduff killed. Remember though, language is slippery. Words never express exactly what you think they do. Characters frequently misunderstand what is said to them, or hear what they want to hear. Think about what it might mean that none of woman born can harm Macbeth. Does that really mean no one? Does that really cover everyone? You'll find out what the phrase means or doesn't in Act 5, but until then, you might consider who in the world might be said to be not of woman born. The final prophecy is the strangest. Be lion-mettled, proud, and take no care who chafes, who frets, or where conspirers are. Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Birnam wood to high Dunsinane hill shall come against him. The prophecy is that Macbeth will not be defeated until the forest known as Birnam Wood comes to his castle on Dunsinane Hill. Now, Macbeth is thrilled to hear this because trees can't get up and walk somewhere else. It sounds crazy. That will never be. Who can impress the forest, bid the tree unfix his earthbound root? Sweet bodements, good. Rebellious dead, rise never till the wood of Birnam rise, and our high-placed Macbeth shall live the lease of nature, pay his breath to time and mortal custom. But again, remember, what someone means by what they say is always ambiguous in this play. Is there any sense in which a forest could move to a new place? Consider too, the witches have already said things that previously seemed to the characters to be impossible. That Macbeth would be king, that Banquo's sons would be kings. At the same time, things too shocking and horrible for words to even express have already happened. Remember how Macduff couldn't find the words to tell everyone that Duncan had been stabbed in his bed. Many things seem impossible until they happen. The future might seem impossible until it comes. A year ago, if someone had told you that soon you wouldn't be able to leave your apartment in New York City without wearing a mask, would you have believed them? 4 years ago, if someone had told you that the host of a reality television show was going to be the next president, would you have believed them? Things can sound crazy until suddenly they're real. Finally, Macbeth asks if Banquo's descendants will really be kings, and the witches present him with a strange vision. a line of 8 young kings that resemble Banquo, followed by the ghost of Banquo. This is hard to misinterpret, maybe because it doesn't involve words, and it freaks Macbeth out. How does Macbeth react to this last vision, which he does not like? Infected be the air whereon they ride, and damned all those that trust them. Macbeth then finds out from the nobleman Lennox that Macduff has gone to England, which makes Macbeth nervous, given the witch's first prophecy. So he gives an order to have Macduff's entire family killed. When Macbeth doesn't like the prophecies he hears, he rejects them, and appears to do whatever he can to control his own fate. We come now to the play's only boring scene, Act 4, Scene 3. Well, the end of the scene is great, actually, but the first half is really boring and goes on forever. Basically, Macduff reaches England and meets with Duncan's son Malcolm and tries to convince him to come back to Scotland to attack Macbeth. Malcolm suspects Macduff could be an agent of Macbeth's, trying to lure him back to Scotland so Macbeth can kill him. So Malcolm tests Macduff by telling Macduff that if he were to succeed his father, he would be a terrible king because he's a terrible person. He talks about how terrible he is forever. When Macduff says, okay, if you're so terrible, I'll go fight Macbeth on my own, Malcolm says, ha, I was tricking you. Actually, I'm such a good person, I'm boring. I just wanted to make sure that you were really concerned to do what's right for Scotland. Great job, Malcolm. The end of the scene, though, is really interesting and I think also haunting, and also brings in some of the play's most important ideas. After Malcolm and Macduff have this conversation, the Thane of Ross shows up to tell Macduff that Macbeth killed his entire family. He doesn't know how to tell him this, though, and we see again how words can be ambiguous, how they can fail to express the truth to the listener even while they're technically true. Macduff asks Ross, "How does my wife?" Ross replies, "Why, well." Macduff says, "And all my children?" Ross replies, "Well, too." Macduff says, "The tyrant has not battered at their peace?" And Ross replies, "No, they were well at peace when I did leave them. His wife and children are, in a sense, at peace." The Thane of Ross then says, "Let not your ears despise my tongue forever, which shall possess them with the heaviest sound that ever yet they heard." And Macduff replies, I guess at it." Macduff does not guess at it. The Thane of Ross warns Macduff, "I'm going to tell you the worst thing you've ever heard." And Macduff probably guesses that Macbeth has done something terrible as king to the country. He guesses he can already imagine the worst Macbeth can do, but he cannot imagine the worst Macbeth can do. Remember, many things seem impossible until they happen. The future might seem impossible until it comes. The Thane of Ross finally tells Macduff outright, "Your castle is surprised, your wife and babes savagely slaughtered. To relate the manner were on the quarry of these murdered deer to add the death of you." And Macduff can't even understand what the Thane of Ross is saying to him. Not only could he not imagine what Macbeth was capable of doing, when he's told what Macbeth has done to his family, he can't even follow the words. They don't make sense to him because they don't refer to anything that he has ever considered or worried about or thought about before. This is one of the most disturbing scenes in the play, maybe the most disturbing. But this scene also ends on, I wouldn't say a positive, but maybe a hopeful note. In previous videos and on Blackboard, we've discussed how Lady Macbeth questioned Macbeth's masculinity because he was hesitating to commit a cold-blooded murder. And we've also discussed how Macbeth questioned the masculinity of the two servants he wanted to convince to assassinate Banquo. Those scenes invoked a certain masculine stereotype, a stereotype of a man as capable of acting ruthlessly, brutally, without emotion, without remorse. At the end of this scene, Malcolm tells Macduff, "Dispute it like a man," meaning act like a man, get your revenge against Macbeth. And Macduff replies, "I shall do so, but I must also feel it as a man. I cannot but remember such things were that were most precious to me. Did heaven look on and would not take their part?" He's saying he's going to take his revenge against Macbeth, but first he has to feel it like a man, suffer through his grief at the loss of his family. Also, unlike Macbeth, Macduff admits his guilt. Sinful Macduff, they were all struck for thee. Not that I am, not for their own demerits, but for mine, fell slaughter on their souls. Heaven rest them now. Macduff acknowledges that it's his fault his family was killed. Macbeth is really after him, and he left his family alone and defenseless when he went to England. For Macduff, masculinity involves confronting his emotions, not suppressing them, not disregarding them, and also confessing his guilt. It's a contrasting conception of masculinity from Macbeth's and Lady Macbeth's. So, as we move into Act 5, Shakespeare has set up a conflict between two models of masculinity, and one of those models is now setting out to take down the other.